We've got two of our senators happen to be here today. Senator Scrivens here and Senator Parks is in the back here. Acknowledge them, and they have always been advocates of equal rights for everybody, regardless of race, creed, or any difference. And I'm here to tell you the same thing. I am Steve Sisolak. I'm currently the chair of the Clark County Commission. I've been on the board. This is my 9th year. I'm entering my 10th year on the Clark County Commission. Prior to that, I served 10 years on the Nevada System Higher Education Board of Regents, where we govern the universities, the community colleges, and so forth. I'm active in this community. I'm a single dad. I raised 2 daughters, both graduates of UNLV. I'm really proud of both of my daughters and what they've done and what they've become. My oldest daughter works in the public defender's office, and my youngest daughter works for the hockey team. She doesn't play hockey. She's in the marketing department for the hockey team, for those that are hockey fans. I am running for governor. This is something that I've looked at for a long period of time. I spent last time Governor Stonewall ran for election, I looked at running seriously against him, and we did our due diligence, and quite frankly, didn't think we could have a good path to win, so we decided against it. And this time, Governor Stonewall is term limited out, and we are running for office, and we're running for that office. We firmly believe we have a path to beat Adam Laxalt. The worst thing that could happen to the LGBT community is probably Adam Laxalt, and I think you all realize that is the worst thing. We have a path to victory. We've been very successful in terms of our endorsements that we've gotten from the community. Our public safety officers, all of our police officers around the state have endorsed us. Various labor and trade organizations have endorsed us. The Teachers Clark County Education Association has endorsed us. We have the financial resources that we can beat Adam Laxalt in a general election. It's been 20 years since we've had a Democrat in Carson City. And if they have the chance of having a Democratic legislature, a Senate, an Assembly, at the same time you have a Democratic governor, we can accomplish some things that prior to this had been impossible, and things wouldn't be dreamt of happening, and I think this time we can make them a reality. The 3 things I am focusing the most on, which are my priorities, are, as was said by Stephen, education is a huge thing for me. I'm a firm believer that education is a great equalizer. I learned that when I was on the Board of Regents. I think we need to invest more in our schools and in our teachers. Teachers are underpaid and overworked. And I think we need to get more into the vocational and technical training with our teachers and with our students than we do now. We don't give kids the opportunity to get into the trades. A lot of the trades are good jobs. You want to be a welder, you want to be an electrician or a plumber. Those are jobs that start at $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. You can provide for yourself and your families and earn a good living that way. Everyone isn't going to go to college and get saddled with that enormous amount of debt that they have as a result of that. One of the best things we can do as elected officials is to help create jobs. I don't believe we create any jobs. I think we can either make it easier or more difficult for the private sector to create jobs. So I'm in favor of eliminating burdensome and duplicative regulations so that we can make it easier for businesses to come in. We need to diversify our economy because when we hit the next recession, and guaranteed there will be one, whether or not it's going to be in 2 years or 10 years or 20 years, our economy is cyclical and it's dependent upon everybody else's economy around the country, whether folks come here. So we will have another recession or downturn. We need to be more diversified so we're not hit as hard as we were the last time. I do believe I've got a mother that is my rock. She's 91 years old, just celebrated her 91st birthday. And I know the healthcare problems that our senior citizens face. And they should not have to decide on whether or not, now my mother's not in this position, thank goodness, but she's blessed that I've got a sister that she lives with. I've got an older brother that passed about 10 years ago. But my mother, I understand the difficulties in dealing with healthcare as you become more dependent upon your children or a caregiver. And they shouldn't be dependent, I have to make the decision between prescriptions and food, and unfortunately that's not just an anecdotal rhetoric, that's reality. That's the situation that we face. So we need to make sure that having cash in your pocket does not preclude, or not having cash does not preclude you from obtaining adequate health care. So those are brief, in a really brief summary, what our biggest 3 items are, and I really want to listen to what your issues are, so I'd like to leave as much time as I could for questions. So, yes, sir.
Just a question about your first issue, which is education. You said you wanted to put more money into education and helping teachers get paid and all this stuff. So do you have a specific plan or perhaps a number of different plans on how you would raise the funds to be able to put more money into education?
I do. And on the county commission, one of the things we face is balancing a budget. We have to have a balanced budget at the county commission. 95% of the properties in Clark County are currently in abatement, which means they're not paying their full assessed valuation on their taxes. What happened during the Great Recession or downturn, if you can understand, and I'm going to try to explain this without having a chart in front of me. If a house was $200,000 and you were paying, let's just say you're paying $2,000 in taxes to make it easy to figure, and it fell down to $80,000, and that's not just numbers, that's actually what happened in our community. That's how far these prices fell. And your taxes went down to $800. Well, the governments that rely on those taxes were budgeted based on the $2,000 figure. So what happened is we spent all the reserves. And people say, cut the fat, Republicans say, cut the fat out of government. We have no more fat left in government. We're cutting jobs, we're cutting people, we're cutting communities, we're cutting programs. That's how bad it is. So when the cap was instituted back in the legislature, prices were escalating at an crazy rate. I mean, a house would go from $100,000, 2 weeks later it was worth 110, and 4 months later it's worth 150 and 160. People were flipping these houses, and there were runaway assessed valuations. So they put this cap in that the price could only go up, your taxes could only go up 3% a year on a home. Well, no one ever expected we'd have this downturn in a house that was $200,000, now goes down to $80,000. What happened is now you're only assessed the valuation, say instead of being $2,000, you're only paying $800 in taxes. It doesn't even go up 3% a year. There's a secondary formula for the taxes that relies on the LIBOR rate and 20 quarters rolling forward. The first quarter falls off, another quarter comes on, and it's calculated. And last year, our increase in taxes in Clark County was 0.25%. We can't run the government on 0.25%. Our employees are getting 2% COLA raises. So where are we going to get the money when we're only increasing it at 0.25? Now, I've dealt with, and I know that people think that the seniors are the ones that are opposed to this, and that's absolutely not true. I spoke to a senior group out in Sun City and explained to them that if their taxes were $500, that they could budget the next year, the most it would go up is $15, and it would be $515. The money that could be generated from that alone would be more than enough to pay for our education funding that we need to do by the increasing having the property tax caps actually at 3% and 8%. The other thing I'm in favor of, if you sell your house and it's in abatement, I think that it should go to the full assessed valuation. So who's ever buying it knows what it's going to when they buy it. And they're buying it under the premise that, okay, now it's going to have the taxes at $2,000 where it belongs, because if someone builds a new house next year, they're going to pay $2,000. So the property turns over every 5 to 7 years, and we get all the property in a period of 5 to 10 years up at the increased valuation. That would give local governments and the state government more than enough money to adequately fund not only education, but mental health and some of the other issues that we're facing. So that's how I would like to do it. Sir?
One of the biggest concerns I've been hearing throughout a lot of the communities is that it's not necessarily a lack of funding for education, it's how it's distributed once it's collected. So do you have any ideas or proposals as to how you would change the allocation of the funds raised to education, specifically Clark County versus rural areas of the state?
Yeah, I don't want to pit one area of the state against another part of the state, but I can tell you what the first thing we have to do to help, in my opinion, fix the education system is pay teachers. You cannot make a living being a teacher anymore. It simply doesn't work. My youngest daughter tried being a substitute, a long-term substitute teacher. She lasted 6 months and came home and said, Dad, I can't do this. They don't get any support from the administration. They're relying on bringing their own supplies to school. They bought a box of granola bars. She'd go to Costco and buy and give the kids because they're coming to school hungry. So I think what we need to do is put money, first you have to pay teachers. If you're going to want good teachers, to recruit and retain good teachers, you have to pay them. You have to pay them a decent wage so that they can afford to be a part of this economy, buy a house like everybody else can buy, and go from there. Then I'm not in favor of allocating all the money to either a Zoom or Victory School. It's got to go into the classroom so that every child, and the whole formula needs to be redone, because you can't, an ELL student is going to require more money than a student that's not an ELL student. So I think what you need to do is get the educators and the support staff together and come up with a way that would be fair to fund the school so that everybody gets a fair bite of the apple and they're treated separately. Because they have a Victory School next to a non-Victory School and one is funded differently is just simply not fair. So that's what I'd like to do.
I have a two-part question.
Okay.
And bear with me.
I will.
My family's been here since 1921. We kept our daughter in private school. In those days, private school was Catholic school.
Right.
Okay? And the bottom line is the teachers worked for less money in the Catholic schools than they did in the public schools because there were controls. In other words, there were 4 children waiting for every one of our kids that were in school. And we knew if we didn't do what we were asked, okay, our kids were out and somebody else's was in. So it's not always just money, that's number one. Administration, many years ago, somebody blew the whistle and all the administrative salaries were posted extremely upside down. That's on the education side. The other issue, having my family lived here so long, the crime is out of control. And our police captain said, you know, give me more manpower, which we did, and it's still getting worse.
Okay. Let me, two parts, let me do the education part first, okay, if I could. You're right, and I went to Catholic school when I was yay big for 2 years and got, of course, we had nuns at the time, and I got my knuckles slapped more than one time for not being appropriate in class, I guess what it would be, and I had it coming every time that it happened. Unfortunately, our public school teachers don't have that privilege. I mean, they don't have the ability to discipline the way they do in private schools. And now there just aren't parochial schools. Now there's other forms of private schools that exist. You've got the Meadows, and you got the day school, and you've got those. And you're right, there is a line, but also in those schools, there's much more parental involvement than there is in a lot of our public schools. A lot of the public schools, unfortunately, parents think they can drop the kids off at the front door and get them back educated. It doesn't work that way.
We have to change that.
I agree we need to change that, but we need to give the teachers the opportunity to have the tools to change that. And I'm not saying money is the whole answer, but money is certainly part of the answer. We have to pay teachers. If you want to recruit and retain good quality educators and support staff, you have to pay them. You can't pay our sanitation workers 1.5 times what you pay a teacher. It just doesn't work because our priorities are mixed up in that. So that needs to change. And you're right. I mean, private schools, it's a whole different structure than a public school is. I mean,
but
teachers.
It can be changed. The issue of discipline is real important. I went back, when I was young, I went back to evening school. And I had a teacher that spoke to the entire class, and we ranged from 17 years of age to in the 70s. And she made it very clear. She said, during the day, I have to tolerate your garbage. She said, now this was a public school teacher, okay, at VOTEC. So the idea is to change these ideas. It's not just money. You're right as far as it's a different way of thinking. And we have to start retraining everybody.
Right.
To be responsible, to have respect, to respect education, and to respect the privilege of that education.
Respect is an answer to a lot of our problems, you're right. And respect would go a long way in education. Respect isn't exclusive to education. It's in a lot of things. One of the reason we're here is because there's a lack of respect.
We gotta start someplace.
I agree. The law enforcement side of it. I sit on our fiscal affairs committee with Sheriff Lombardo, where we regulate Metro. You're right, we do have a crime problem. One of the issues that we have is that when we added more cops, and I argued this at the time, when we added more cops through the more cop sales tax, they should have expected and acknowledged we're going to get more arrests, because that's what police officers do. Usually they do arrest some people. We have an overcrowded jail system right now that we're going to have to start using the North Valley complex because we don't have enough beds. And the judicial system takes too long churning its way through getting these people adjudicated. Misdemeanants are no longer held in the Clark County Detention Center. We don't have a room for them. If you're not in on a felony, you're not held. So what we need to do is, again, and I know people don't want to hear this, we have to have, if you want to say you can take the bad guys off the street, you have to have a place to put them. And that means opening up the North Valley complex and funding it to open up. But we're working with the sheriff to do that. And I got a lot of hands, so I don't know who I go to next, so. Go ahead.
This year I attended it's called Sans Care, and they revealed, there was 500 people there. They revealed that Nevada has the highest number of homeless youth, kids living in the street. These are high school kids. In the park near my house, there's 3 living in the park. Maybe they're 19, 20 years old. 40% of those children are rejected by their parents because they're from our community, because they've already said they're gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender. So their parents throw them into the street. I would like to know from you as a candidate and also for the other people serving in political office here like Rich and I, what can we do? This is something that is so troubling. These are kids who are high school age, living in the streets. We recently created a place at the Salvation Army to house 9 people. But these are adults, but we've got to do something to help.
We have to do more. There's a charity in town that Stephen had spoke about, and we want the Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth that I've been active in.
That's
That
it.
I can tell you, you don't understand how bad that problem is, because most of them aren't living on the street, they're living on rooftops. Because with these strip malls, a lot of them go up the ladder, and they're sleeping on the roofs because they're victims of predators when they're 13, 14, 16 years old. And pedophiles are getting these kids when they're out there, so they can go up on the roof where the adults, the big guys, can't get up there. So they go up there and they're living on the roofs of some of these strip properties. We need to be able to help. They have a housing program at the Partnership for Homeless Youth. They have a food pantry, a clothing closet, those sort of things in order to give them some resources. But it's a part of our society, you're right, that has been kicked to their curb, abandoned by the people that they thought loved them most, which are their parents. And they have nowhere else to turn except go in the street, and they are so susceptible to being victimized that then it's a tragic situation. So we need to do that basically through the faith-based groups and the other charities that are willing to provide resources for them, because they don't trust a lot of people. If you've got some sleeping in the park, that's unusual, that sometimes they're together, usually they'll stay together, but there's some security in that. But we need to make sure that they do have a place that's safe, because they're victimized repeatedly.
Could we do a tents, like in San Diego, they put up my sister that lives in San Diego, they put up a huge tent.
Yeah, the whole homeless situation is something that's going to have to get a lot more attention. And you drive down, by Four Master and by Shade Tree and Catholic Charities. It's the whole area that's just, there's beds available. Some folks don't want to go in those beds for one reason or another. Up by the Flamingo Wash, we've got a huge amount living them in the wash itself, and we're trying to work with that at the county level. There's a lot of services available. There's a lot of duplication, and there's not enough coordination. So maybe a statewide effort or something. The homeless population is it's at epidemic proportions right now, and it needs to be worked on.
So as governor, what would you do about it?
I don't have an answer for homeless. I'm gonna go next to you. I don't have an answer for it. I think what you need to do is put a group together. I don't know if you've gotten to meet Arnie Stalk at Veterans Village. Arnie is a gentleman that I ran against 30 years ago when I ran for the Board of Regents, and has taken on the veteran population in terms of homelessness. And they've got some facilities that people have donated for and help rehabilitate the facilities and have people living there. But we need to decide how we're going to deal with this population. And I think what you need to do is put a group of experts together. There are needs there. You can't expect somebody to get a job when they don't have clean clothes to wear and they can't take a shower and they don't have a mailing address or computer where they can get a message to come down and go to work. So those need to be addressed. And I think you need to put together, I'm smart enough to know that I'm smart enough not to have the answers. I don't have the answers. So I think you need to put together some experts that can say, I'm the last one that's in favor of studies. But I think we need to put together an action group that's going to say, let's start in this area and make small steps, because you can't solve these problems overnight. You can't eat an elephant in one sitting. You got to take a bite at a time, and that's how I think homeless has to be addressed. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my question kind of addresses, I'm just going to stand so I can see some of the folks who spoke already, but we talked about education, we talked about crime, we talked about homelessness. So one thing we have to remember is these issues are interconnected. Okay, and a lot of them are linked to poverty and the lack of health care in this state. So when you talk about homelessness, you're talking about health care. There's a high percentage of homeless folks who are mentally ill and are unable to get the care that they need. If you've ever tried to walk into a hospital on Medicaid, good luck. You'll be in there a long time waiting. Secondly, we rank last in mental health care in the country. That's disgraceful. We need to do something about that, so I want you to address that, please. Secondly, when you talk about education, where's the parental involvement? Well, guess what? Parents are working 2 or 3 jobs to feed their kids because our wages are so low And the terms of employment are so bad, being a right to work your ass off for very little pay state, okay? We need our parents to be able to work a regular 40-hour work week and come home and have money to put their kids in piano lessons and spend time doing their homework with their kids, okay? That addresses the minimum wage issue. I want to know your stance on the minimum wage. Healthcare, we passed sprinkle care. To me, that's a little bit of a cop-out, but it's better than what we have now. What would you do for healthcare? So there's some
Okay.
points for you.
I could talk for the next 30 minutes. You gave me a lot of that one thing there too. And I'm going to try to address it as much as I can. Health or mental health. I'll take on mental health because that wasn't addressed. I can tell you that 40% of our detainees in the correction center are mental health patients. And we get them straight. Oftentimes they get them on medication. They let them out and they're out on the street for a week and an officer picks them up and they're back in and it's a revolving door. We do not have enough beds for mental health patients. And I can tell you the problem, the reason we don't have enough beds, one, we don't commit enough money to it. And here again, it's one of these issues. If we had a better source of revenue coming in, like the property tax, we'd be able to solve some of these problems. We had one today that we had a developer in our zoning meeting come and wanted to put a mental health facility in, and it was, I think it was 70 beds and 40 employees. And the people were, the people that objected, neighbors are go, oh, I'm in support of mental health hospitals and mental health facilities, just not in my neighborhood. Put them somewhere else. I like them, but just don't put them here. I mean, that's within a half a mile of my house. I don't want them on my way to the Walgreens or the Smiths. That's what we get on a regular basis. So you need people that have the courage to say, no, we have to expand the mental health programs and have enough beds to put people in them.
Can I counter that?
Sure.
There is an issue with bed access. You're absolutely right.
It's a huge
Access is
issue.
absolutely an issue. The licensing for providers is a big issue as well. We have one of the most ridiculous licensing requirements. Even professionals that have worked in other states for 10, 20 years have to come here and be treated as if they're brand new out of school and have never worked in the industry before and do 2 years of volunteer service. Nobody's coming to Nevada to practice. So that's another problem. But regarding mental health, not everybody needs a bed in a hospital. They need meds. And the problem is they can't afford their co-pays, their deductibles, or getting insurance at all. And that leads to the healthcare problem. So even folks who have Medicare on disability, they still have co-pays and deductibles, and that's not doable for them.
That's our whole healthcare system. Until you get into a single payer system that's going to resolve this once and for all, we're
Are
going
you
to
in
continue.
support of
Hey.
Yeah, I think that's where we're going to end up. Unfortunately, I hate to tell you this, at my age, I don't know if it's going to happen in my lifetime because resistance to it is so high. But yes, at some point, we have to get in a single payer system because that's the only thing that's going to resolve these problems all the way through. But to get to your point about mental health and the meds and whatnot, if people have a job, a good job, I'm not talking a minimum wage job. That's why I've been supportive of so many projects that we've had here. We have over $15 billion worth of projects on the books in the next 3 years in Clark County. $15 billion. Now you're looking at a stadium that's 13,000 construction workers, a convention center is 12,000 construction workers, Resorts World is 10,000 construction workers. You're putting a lot of people to work with jobs that have benefits and they can support their families. That's what we need to do. If you give a person a chance to earn a living and support his family and their kids get new shoes and a new backpack when it's time to go back to school, so they're not made fun of and they're not bullied because their parents don't make as much money, we're in a better situation for everybody. And if you have a job, I know what it's like to not have a job. I remember when my father came home when I was younger and told my mom, who worked for General Motors for 30 years, and said, Mary, I got laid off. And how devastated he was to get laid off. And how our whole life changed and how his self-dignity changed as a result of that. And he tried a bunch of different things and it didn't work till eventually he got called back. And it took years off his life. And I don't think he was ever the same as a result of that. I don't want to see more people face that. Yes, ma'am.
Going back to healthcare, I noticed that you said you're in support of Medicare for all. However, in the state of Nevada, what are you going to do? What are you going to propose to do? In Michigan, in Massachusetts, they have medical care for all their citizens. Something was proposed during last legislative session, approximately 8, maybe 10 years ago. Something else was also proposed, a type of insurance type program for all Nevadans to be able to contribute to. And I'm wondering that in terms of what would you do for the citizens of Nevada? Because
Okay.
we're going to have to counter what's going on at the national level.
Right.
We're going to have to take care of our citizens here of the state of Nevada. And when I say our citizens, that also include those people who are undocumented and documented within that, because they are all contributing to our economy. So I'd like to know your stance on that. With respect to education, I would like to say that, it is the money. Money is critical to the whole thing. Public education, unlike private education, I went to Catholic school. I sent my child to Catholic school. You get to choose to go to that school because you're paying into it. Public education has to accept every single child that goes there. Every child has a right to education. That means accepting that child who has been homeschooled and they're going in at 7 years of age to kindergarten and still doesn't know their shapes, letters, words, all these other things. Children who are in foster care, children who are abused, children who don't have the stability of a family. So, it's really nice to talk about the discipline, but discipline is not the primary problem in public education. It's not funded at the level it should be, and taking money away and putting it into charter schools is not a good solution. So I'd like to know your position on charter schools and the way that the governor set it up so that positions that were formerly elected are now appointed. Are you interested in reversing those, or are you going to continue with the same?
Okay, and here again, I'm going to try to answer some of those, but I could talk a long time on the questions you asked, and I'm going to get a little bit. We have to decide, and as a group, you brought up great issues tonight: homelessness and jobs and education and mental health and those issues. It's a bigger issue than that. What we need to do, and the reason that you're all here is because you're all Democrats. That's what matters. We need to decide what type of a state we want to be, what type of a society we want to be, what services we want to provide. And when we decide what services we want to provide, then you have to leave it to the folks that are in the back of the room in the legislature and say, tell me how we're going to fund it. Because that's what has to happen. We have to decide what services we want to provide, and then what the best way to fund those services is. I'm in favor of charter schools as long as you don't pay for them with ESAs. You want to start a charter school, you want to start a private school, that's fine. But you're not going to divert money from the public education system for it. Not over my dead body. But the money that goes into the classroom, I am sick and tired of looking at the NPRI list, and you look at the dean and the vice dean and the assistant dean and the associate dean and the nearby dean and the faraway dean and every other dean, and the teacher who's actually in the classroom teaching the students are not getting paid. It's that simple. The money is not getting where it belongs to get. You can't just say, I'm going to throw money in the classroom. You have to say, here's where it's going. And this idea of getting money from one place to another, education is a mishmash of funding. You're getting, C-tax money, you're getting forfeiture money, you're getting room tax money. You can't keep supplanting this, because the marijuana tax money that was supposed to go to education, that only passed because they told people it was going to go to education, and then it didn't go to education, is in a rainy day fund. That's not where it belongs. It should have gone into the classroom, and not where it went there, and it was supplanted by taking other money out. That's not what was supposed to happen. And that needs to change, and we need to have people that have the courage and the backbone to change it, and that's what I intend to do. Yes, ma'am, and then I'll bring this up.
If I could, we have time for just one more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hopefully you'll invite me back another time.
You can come back anytime.
Okay.
Hi, how are you? My name is Sean Henry, and actually my husband is running for Assembly District Man for District 42. And one thing I want to say is that I'm a substitute teacher long term right now, so I'm actually in the classroom. And this year we didn't have any money for the budget. I teach K through 5, and I'm a music teacher. All of them. A lot of the teachers do not have the budget. Everything that I have to spend this year, I spent out of my pocket.
That's wrong.
Last year, I spent out of my pocket. So, you know, it really discourages me to see those kids who need. And that we as teachers have to provide not only their parenting, but then their education and the money to
Right.
sponsor them. And so, you know, I get a lot of that because a lot of parents work, so I'm their parent when they're not available. And it's kind of sad to see these parents have to work. They can't be in the programs, they can't be in any meetings,
Right.
because they're working much more over 40 hours a week, you know, some 60, 70 hours a week, and I find it very disappointing. So I just kind of wanted to bring that point up.
And you're absolutely right, and not only is it not fair to you, because it's not fair to you and your family, it's not fair to those students that are in your classroom either. So we need to take a stand. We're either gonna fix it, or we're gonna keep talking about it, and nothing's gonna get done. And the only way that's gonna happen is if you have a democratically controlled legislature and a democratic governor that are gonna be able to work together in order to make that happen. And we can get elected, and that can make those changes.
The issue of health is probably the lady was speaking about a few minutes ago. Massachusetts has an excellent program, and so does Hawaii. What I would love to see happen is maybe we put something together, we study those states and implement programs like that. Then we wouldn't be beating a dead horse.
And I'll just answer the question with it. I'm a firm believer. There's no pride of ownership when it comes with me. You know, and I'm not a big fan of reinventing the wheel. They already did that centuries ago. If somebody's got a better idea, let's go copy it and bring it here.
Right.
You're absolutely right. We don't need to study it. Copy it, bring it here, and implement it.
That's right.
Get things done.
Real briefly, sorry, she mentioned the minimum wage, and I didn't hear you address it. Would you be in favor of raising the minimum?
I'm in favor of raising the minimum wage, but you can't do it in one fell swoop. The problem you get is there are so many small businesses that exist, and I know a lot of these folks that have.
$15
I have an answer for this,
or higher.
actually. Are you familiar with the universal basic income?
No.
UBI.
UBI is a brilliant
Excuse
idea.
me.
I'd like to take, well, I mean, I know.
Just a moment, I know you're interrupting,
Department of Ed
you're
will
interrupting.
talk all about this. In fact, I defer to that person.
Sir.
Right now. Would you tell us about them? Just saying.
You're interrupting a speaker. We don't
I was called on.
allow that.
All right, fair enough.
She was speaking and you interrupted her.
$15 an hour minimum wage.
Increase staggering over time, we don't have to.
I'm in favor of increased staggering over time for minimum wage, yes. But I don't want to do it. That should have been done all along. We wouldn't be in this position.
Exactly.
That's what should have happened. You can't make these drastic jumps at one time for employers, and you can't do it for the employees either. It needs to be done on a regular, calculated basis where it's going up. Cost of living, you can go up 2%, 3% a year, and the rate slowly goes up. Hey, I know this. My first job, I'm a lot older than most people in this room, was for $1 an hour. I worked for $1 an hour at a golf course, cutting grass, picking up golf
It's a
balls.
lot farther then than it does now.
It did go a lot farther than you're right.
I do have a question, because you did mention that there's a shortage of beds. Real quick, what do you think about releasing people that have been incarcerated because of marijuana possession charges? That would free up a lot of beds.
It wouldn't free them up in mental health, but I absolutely think that they shouldn't be incarcerated. Now, unless it's dealing or transporting across state lines major amounts of, but misdemeanor marijuana crimes should never have been prosecuted in the first place.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. You've got great questions, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to come back another